All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our lesson for January 9th. This is titled Revolutions in Europe. So our objectives and standards: to analyze why Europeans and Americans supported the revolution in Greece, to conclude why the revolutions in 1830 and 1848 were not successful, explain the political movements in France, and analyze why the czars in Russia pushed for industrialization. And please take a moment there to just briefly read over the standards. So our desired result for today is what changes occurred in Europe. We're going to talk about a bunch of different revolutions and different things that are going to come about in Europe during the early 1800s, following the French Revolution and Napoleon, and also following the Congress of Vienna. So we're going to talk about a bunch of different countries and some different things that are going to occur in them as well. So Europe deals with changes. So you just learned about, hopefully, in the lesson from yesterday, that while Latin American countries were going through revolutions, Europe is going to be confronting some changes as well. The Congress of Vienna, and we talked about that before break, had tried to restore peace to Europe through bringing back, or the restoration of monarchs and dividing territories. Now, the Congress of Vienna is successful at doing this on an international scale. What I mean by that is there's very little war and conflict between countries. So, Europe and France aren't at war with each other. Russia and Spain aren't at war with each other due to this restoration, what the Congress of Vienna does. However, countries are going to face internal problems. So while countries are getting along with each other, like we said, France, England, Spain, inside their countries, like inside France, people aren't going to be happy about what's going on. So we're going to see many revolutions that are going to erupt across Europe between 1815 and 1848. Now, there's schools of political thought that are going to kind of, I don't want to say excel, but they're going to kind of bring about some of these revolutions in a way. So during the early 1800s, there were three schools of political thought that tried to gain supremacy in Europe. The first of these is the conservative. And I don't want you thinking like we talk today, like conservative and liberal in terms of like American politics, but you'll kind of see maybe where some of these views and political views may come into play in American society today. But conservative, they argued to protect the traditional monarchies in Europe. They wanted to protect the kings, the queens. They wanted to restore the kings and the queens. And typically, these consisted of the nobility and wealthy property owners. We also have those of the liberal political school of thought. They believe that more power should be given to the elected parliament. So, like like the British Parliament, the French parliaments, things like that. They also believe that only the educated and landowners should vote. It also consisted mainly of middle-class business leaders and merchants. And then we had those who were of the radical view, who wanted dramatic changes that it is going to extend democracy to all people. They believed that the government should practice the ideas of the French Revolution, which were liberty, brotherhood, and equality. We're also going to see something called nationalism begin to rise in Europe during this time. So in Europe, while the schools of political thought argued amongst each other, nationalism began to develop. Now, nationalism is the belief that a person should be devoted to one's country instead of a king or a queen or a government. So supporting your country any means necessary, not just supporting the government, but supporting your country in general. Now, this can get a little confusing. A nation, we typically consider, our country as a nation, but a nation doesn't always have to be a country. It can be a group of people who share a common belief, culture, or history, okay? Now, once a nation has created its own independent government, it can then become a nation state, okay, which would be like a country we are today. Nation states defend their territory and their way of life. Now, in the early 1800s, there were only a few locations that could call themselves nation-states in Europe. For example, the only ones that could really do this were France, England, and Spain. There's not really a German country. There's not really an Italian country. There's not really a Greek country. We're going to get into that later on about the development of, well, we'll talk about the development of Greece today. But we'll talk about Italy and Germany and how they come about later on. Right now, they're kind of just a loose group of people that they really don't have a country per se. They're just kind of like a group of people that have a common way of life. So the growth and spread of nationalism will definitely lead to the rise of other countries. So speaking, like I just said, we'll talk about the Greeks. So the Greeks are going to fight for independence. The Greeks had been part of the Ottoman Empire for centuries. Now, following in nationalist ideas of, you want to form your own country, you want to have your own way of life, they are going to demand independence from the Ottomans in 1821. Well, the Ottomans are obviously going to say no. And what's going to happen is the Greeks and the Ottomans are then going to go to war. Now, the Greeks were kind of outnumbered and outmatched by the Ottomans, but they're going to have the support of other countries, such as Great Britain, France, and Russia, and even the United States is going to support the Greeks in their fight. I don't believe we actually sent fighters over to fight, but we support them in different ways. But Great Britain, France, and Russia will get together and send troops, and they are going to unite with the Greeks to fight the Ottomans. And many reasons that people supported the Greeks over the Ottomans was they felt connected to ancient Greek culture, things like democracy and art and liberty and freedom and things like that. So they're going to support the Greeks because of that. And also because of their Christian religion. Obviously, the Ottomans were more of an Islamic Muslim faith, where the Greeks had a more Christian faith. So many people are going to support the Greeks over a Muslim faith as well. So a combined force of Greeks and European forces defeated the Ottoman fleet in 1827, and finally, the Greeks will gain independence with support from other world nations in 1830. So this will begin the beginning of what we know as Greece today. There's going to be some rebel revolutions across Europe as well. Like we said, liberals and nationalists are going to begin to rebel against their governments. These new monarchies that were put in place by the Congress of Vienna, they're going to begin to rebel against them. For example, the Belgians actually rebelled against Dutch rule, and nationalists in Italy tried to unite against the Austrian government, but they were crushed by Austrian forces. That won't be the end of them, though. Italy will come back and form its own country. Like we said, we'll talk about that later on. Russian forces are going to stop a rebellion by the Polish, and the order that was established by the Congress of Vienna will be restored once again. So while we have this brief rise in rebel revolutions, the Congress of Vienna, the things that they had set up will be restored again. Now, there's going to be a rebellion in 1848. Ethnic uprising is going to spread across Europe in 1848. So, different groups of people are not going to want to be controlled by a foreign government or by a government or a king or queen they don't connect with. So, liberal groups are going to demand independence. Now, there's going to be violence across Europe on a widespread scale, especially in Austria. And because of the violence and rioting in Austria, excuse me, Metternich, who we talked about in the Congress of Vienna, will be forced to resign. He's not going to be able to hold on to his power there. Politics are going to go back and forth in Europe between conservatives and liberals for many, many years, for about a year or so. But unfortunately, the liberals are unable to unify themselves against the conservatives. So by 1849, the conservatives will regain control in Europe. The fight in France. 1830, King Charles X tried to restore the absolute monarchy. His picture's on the right-hand side there. Riots broke out and Charles X was forced to flee to Great Britain. His replacement, Louis Philippe I, the bottom picture there, was a supporter of liberal ideas. Unfortunately, after about 18 years, Louis Philippe is going to lose approval with the public. More riots break out in 1848, and the monarchy will be overturned to a republic again. So there's no more a monarchy in France, there'll be a republic again. However, both political factions, conservative and liberal, again, could not agree on what to do, and there's going to be violence in the streets. Many French people, again, are just looking for stability and security. They just want this craziness to stop. So due to the violence, a new moderate, kind of middle of the road between liberal and conservative, constitution is drawn up in 1848, and the constitution will call for a parliament and a strong president to be elected by the French people. New Napoleon. December 1848, the nephew of Napoleon, Louis Napoleon, won the presidential election. His picture is there for you. 4 years later, he named himself emperor. He called himself Emperor Napoleon III. Many of the French people welcomed a strong leader. As ruler, he improved the stability of France. He built railroads, encouraged industrialization, and promoted public works programs. Under his leadership, France saw unemployment decline and the growth of prosperity. In Russia, we're going to see some reforms. Now, by the 1820s, many people in Russia believed that serfdom was wrong. Serfdom is peasants working the land for no pay. You can compare it similar to slavery. Many Russians wanted to do away with the serfdom policy, but the czars, those who were in charge of the country, were afraid of it, were afraid that if they got rid of this policy, it would upset the landowners. The czars, I'm sorry, I messed this up here. The czars needed landowners for power. Just going to write that in here. Landowners for power. My apologies. So the czars need these kind of landowners for power to keep, themselves in control. So that's why they don't want to upset the landowners. I'm sorry for my kind of scribble handwriting here. Just trying to write that in for you. For power. Appreciate you being patient. Okay, again, I apologize for the kind of scribble handwriting there. Now, the problem with serfdom is that this keeps Russia from becoming a more modern society. A failed war. 1853, Tsar Nicholas I, his picture on the right-hand side, goes to war to take over the Ottoman Empire in the Crimean War. Russia was not up to standards on industry and transportation. They lost to a combined force of European powers. His son Alexander II, the bottom picture there, decided to move the country towards modernization. In 1861, Alexander II, he's going to declare the serfs free, so serfdom is no longer, I don't want to say it's no longer around anymore, but he declares them free. However, the problem is that serfs still had to pay debts to the government for the land that they received after serfdom ended. In 1881, 20 years later, terrorists are going to assassinate Alexander II because they felt that he wasn't doing enough to bring about reform. And his successor, Alexander III, will then, because of the assassination of Alexander II, he's going to bring about a strong government again. And he and his government will then help build a strong industrial complex in Russia as well. All right, so thanks for sticking with me there. Please try your best on the questions that follow, and let me know if you have questions. Talk to you soon. Okay, our closure. What changes occurred in Europe? So think about some of the things you learned about in the lesson. Think about how Greece gained its independence. Think about some of the changes and challenges that France went through, and think about some of the struggles and changes that Russia goes through as well. Hope you have a great rest of your day or night. Please let me know of any questions or concerns and try your best on the questions that follow, and hope to talk to you all soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.